Hey there guys, so I wanted to talk about this upcoming Cruiserweight title fight between WBC champion Mairis Briedis and former heavyweight contender Mike Perez. Now this is a good fight and it's an interesting fight and it's an interesting first title defence for Mairis Briedis. Obviously he just won the title off of Marco Huck, the title was vacant and it was a very good performance. He went over to Germany in Marco Huck's backyard and comprehensively outboxed him, won a clear 12-round unanimous decision. I think I only gave Marco Huck one round, and even that was close. So I was very impressed with his performance, and he's certainly established himself as one of the major players at Cruiserweight. But, let's talk about his opponent for a moment, Mike Perez. Now, the first time I ever watched Mike Perez was when I watched him in the Prize Fighter tournament several years ago. I remember I watched it live, and he absolutely blitzed through the tournament. He absolutely smashed everybody. I remember he fought big Ty Fields in the final. I think it was the final anyway. Ty Fields, he was a big 6'9" giant. He was a big southpaw with a massive left hand. He was about the same height as Tyson Fury, but he was even bigger in build. He was fucking massive, that guy. I remember him. And Mike Perez just walked through him. It took him like 40 seconds to stop the guy in the first round. It was incredible. And he also, I think he knocked out Gregory Tony and someone else. Can't remember who the other guy was. But yeah, it was 3 fights in a row. He absolutely blitzed everybody. And it was he looked to be a really promising heavyweight prospect at the time. However, he kind of went off the rails a bit. You didn't really hear much about him for a while, but he did come back and he had a very impressive victory over Magomed Abdusalamov, who was an undefeated guy from Russia. He tragically suffered a brain injury after the fight, which ended his career, which was a real shame. And yeah, he also Mike Perez had a split decision defeat against what's his name? The guy that fought Klitschko, Bryant Jennings, the American guy. Yeah, he went over and fought Bryant Jennings and lost a close split decision, and it was a very close, very competitive fight. And the problem with that fight was, Mike Perez did very well early on. He got off to a good start, but the problem was he was really out of shape for the fight, and he just couldn't really maintain the pace, and he ran out of gas midway through. And Bryant Jennings, who was the much fitter and much better athlete, was able to come back and get the victory. And after all that, he went on to fight Alexander Povetkin in Russia, and he got absolutely destroyed in the first round. It was a devastating defeat, brutal knockout. Just a clinical performance. That was one of Povetkin's best performances, actually. Just the way that he precisely took out Mike Perez in the first round. It was really impressive, and I really wasn't expecting him to take him out that quickly. And it was a bad defeat, and it really looked after that Mike Perez's time as a contender was over. You couldn't have really imagined him coming back and challenging for a world title again after what happened in that fight. So, but he's managed to drop the weight now. He's got himself into much better shape. He's now competing in the cruiserweight division. He had a first round knockout, I believe, earlier this year. I think I watched the fight on YouTube recently, and the opponent, I don't know much about the opponent, don't know who the guy was, but it looked to me like he wasn't really serious. He took one shot and the fight was over. Didn't really seem like he wanted to continue. So you can't really take much from that fight. But Mike Perez, to me, I think just based on the aesthetics of the whole thing, he looks a lot more healthy at cruiserweight. Because the problem is at heavyweight was, even though he is a heavy set guy and a big built guy, he doesn't really have he didn't really look to be an athlete to me. He looked kind of flabby, kind of pudgy, a bit too much chub, a bit too much fat around his midsection. But as a cruiserweight, he looks nice and slim. He looks muscular, looks cut, and he looks like an athlete now. And you never know. Perhaps he was more suited for the cruiserweight division. Perhaps he should have moved down to cruiserweight earlier in his career. But we'll find out in this fight now. What kind of things can he do to trouble the champion, Mairis Briedis? Obviously being a southpaw, being one of these elusive Cuban types who likes to take away your jab, and he's quite difficult to hit, and he's quite awkward. I was quite impressed early on in the Bryant Jennings fight with how Mike Perez was boxing, because he is quite a talented fighter, and like I said, in prize fighter, he's shown that he's got a lot of power too. He's quite a big puncher, and being a southpaw, having that big left hand, being a fairly decent boxer, you never know. Perhaps he could take everyone by surprise here, because I don't really think Mairis Briedis has ever fought anybody like that in his career. I mean, in his last couple of fights, he fought Simon Vallily, who was nothing like Mike Perez stylistically. He fought Olenranyu Duradola, who's an orthodox and who's more of a pressure fighter, more of a hard-headed, conventional type, who's quite basic but effective. And of course, he fought Marco Huck, who's again nothing like Mike Perez. Marco Huck is an orthodox. He's more of a stand-up Eastern European type with the tight guard, and he's quite basic, but he's effective. But he's a very rough and tough type of guy, who likes to get in, and he's quite abrasive in there. He's kind of like Saki Obika in that sense. But none of those guys were quite as awkward or quite as unconventional as Mike Perez. So you never know. This could be quite an interesting fight. But I think there's just so much uncertainty, because Mike Perez, we haven't really seen him tested at a high level at the cruiserweight division. We really don't know. We really don't know how he's going to be. I mean, if Mairis Briedis is able to get into the body early on, perhaps those stamina issues that Mike Perez has shown earlier in his career, like in the Jennings fight, perhaps they'll start to resurface. And I just think that from what I saw in Mairis Briedis' last fight against Marco Huck, it showed to me that he has very good stamina. Going into that fight, I picked Mairis Briedis to win the fight. However, I did express a few concerns that I wasn't sure how his stamina was going to be, because he's never really been tested at a really hard pace over the course of 12 rounds, whereas Marco Huck had many times in his career. But he showed to me that he really could handle the pace. Like I said, went 12 rounds, he dominated the fight. Marco Huck looked like he shouldn't even been in the ring with Mairis Briedis. I mean, just the difference in fundamental boxing skills was there. I mean, fundamentally, Mairis Briedis was so far the better boxer, and he was also quicker too. And he's got very heavy hands too. I mean, if you look at his fight against Manwoo Char, for example, I think that fight was at heavyweight. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was. But yeah, he fought Manwoo Char in Russia, and it was a devastating knockout. He knocked Manwoo Char the fuck out, and it was brutal. So clearly, this guy has power. He really does. Mairis Briedis is one of the top punchers at cruiserweight. I mean, I don't think he hits quite as hard as someone like Gassiev or Kudryashov, but he certainly does have heavy hands. And Mike Perez better watch, man, because if this guy, if he's able to get Mike Perez to the body, you never know. Mike Perez's stamina issues might start to surface, and I think what Mairis Briedis needs to do is he needs to set a fast pace, work the jab, and try and get in that straight right to the body. I think a straight right to the body against an elusive southpaw is a really, really tricky shot. It's one that you can catch him off guard with and keep him off balance, and I think he can do that to Mike Perez. And now I believe the fight's taking place in Latvia. I think it's in Mairis Briedis' hometown, which will obviously give him an advantage with the crowd and whatnot. And I think it's important for him to really set a fast pace, really get the crowd going, and really try and take the wind out of Mike Perez's sails early on with the body work. And I think if he does that, he should be able to get himself a mid to late stoppage. So yeah, I favour Mairis Briedis to win the fight. Like I said, there's uncertainty about how good Mike Perez is at cruiserweight, because he doesn't really, hasn't really shown us. I mean, he's had one round against some guy that I'd never heard of, who didn't really look like he want to be there. So, I really don't know what Mike Perez has. I mean, he's come into this tournament with so much uncertainty, and I will say this though: if he is able to beat Mairis Briedis, that's going to be very interesting, because I mean, that might make him one of the favourites, because I believe Mairis Briedis, along with Usyk, is considered one of the favourites to win the tournament. So that'll be an interesting one if that happens. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Mairis Briedis to win. I just think at this stage, coming off victories against people like Marco Huck and Duradola and Manwoo Char and guys like that, to me, he's shown himself to be the real deal so far, and I think that a fight against Mike Perez, which is his first title defense in his hometown, I think he's going to have a lot of motivation, and I think he's probably going to win the fight, probably by stoppage. I'm going to go with Mairis Briedis to win the fight by a late stoppage. I think body shots are the key. Try and like I said before, make those stamina issues that Mike Perez has shown in the past, make them resurface and try and take him out late. I think that's the best course of action here. I really do. So yeah, I'm going with Mairis Briedis to win the fight by knockout. Let me know what you guys think anyway, and thanks for watching.